The cannons ended the battle in mere minutes, but for the women dragged below the pirate deck, the true horror was only just beginning. For within this floating empire built on ransom, violence, slavery, greed, and absolute lawlessness, every creaking plank, every shouted order, and every sunrise could determine whether they would be sold, abandoned, traded, or vanish without a trace, or somehow survive in an ocean where human lives were valued solely for the profit they could generate. You are about to learn exactly what the captains did with the women in their cabins. Picture the year 1718. Trace your finger along the map from the muddy wharves of Charlestown to the wind-battered channels of the Bahamas, where the Atlantic does not look blue but iron gray, streaked with weed, tar, blood, and the black reflection of storm clouds. A merchant vessel sits low in the water, her oak hull swollen from months at sea, her seams packed with oakum, pitch, and animal hair, her canvas snapping above like torn skin in the trade wind. Below deck, between barrels of salt pork, molasses, linen, indigo, and gunpowder, women wait in darkness. Not as legends, not as romantic figures from tavern songs, but as prisoners inside a violent maritime economy where law vanished the moment a pirate flag rose above the horizon. The pirates who captured them were not always wild monsters from myth. Many were former privateers carrying old letters of marque, unemployed sailors from naval wars, deserters, smugglers, and hardened men who understood ship construction, cannon range, cargo value, ransom custom, and human fear with terrifying precision. When their sloop came alongside, its shallow draft allowed it to slide close like a knife beneath the ribs of the sea. Its hull might measure 60 to 80 feet with a narrow beam, raked masts, patched sails, and a deck crowded with swivel guns, muskets, cutlasses, boarding axes, and men whose articles of agreement promised shares of plunder but offered no mercy to those outside the crew. The first horror for captured women was uncertainty. Were they valuable enough for ransom, useful enough for labor, unlucky enough to be sold, or invisible enough to disappear into the machinery of empire? In that silence, the creak of futtocks, the groan of the keelson, the stink of bilge water, and the dry scrape of rope across a belaying pin became the sound of fate being measured. A pirate attack did not begin with screaming. It began with calculation. The lookout saw sailcloth on the horizon, estimated tonnage by mast height, judged whether the vessel carried cannon by the black mouths along the gunwale, and watched how heavily she rode in the water. A merchant snow of 120 tons, a brigantine of 90 tons, or a small coastal sloop packed with passengers could be prey if the wind favored the attacker. Pirates preferred intimidation because powder cost money, shot damaged cargo, and a shattered hull sank profit. Yet when cannon fired, the violence became mechanical and precise. A bronze or iron gun, perhaps a 4-pounder or 6-pounder, was loaded with black powder made from saltpeter, charcoal, and sulfur. Grains packed behind wadding and round shot. When the priming spark caught, the powder decomposed violently into expanding gas, slamming the iron ball down the bore until it burst from the muzzle with smoke, sparks, and heat. Against wood, the shot did not merely make a hole. It drove splinters inward like knives, ripping oak fibers, cracking planks along the grain, shaking tree nails loose, and turning the ship itself into a weapon against the people inside. Women below deck heard the blast before they understood it. Then came falling blocks, torn canvas, screaming animals, smashed barrels, and the sickening realization that surrender might be the only way to remain alive. Once pirates boarded, they searched everything. Sea chests, clothing bundles, hidden coin, jewelry sewn into hems, silver buckles, devotional objects, letters, account books, medicines, and personal tokens. A woman's fate could depend on language, class, nationality, race, age, health, kinship, and the political value of her name. A governor's wife, a merchant's daughter, an innkeeper, an enslaved woman, a servant, a widow, a passenger, or a sailor's spouse did not face the same danger. but all entered the same brutal zone where the ocean erased witnesses and paperwork often arrived too late. Captivity at sea was not one single fate, but a chain of possibilities, each shaped by money. In the Caribbean and Atlantic world, ransom could turn a prisoner into a temporary commodity. Pirates understood this coldly. A woman connected to a wealthy planter, merchant house, colonial official, or shipping family could be held while messages were carried ashore demanding payment in coin, provisions, medicine, gunpowder, sailcloth, or safe passage. The letters were often blunt, and the threat behind them did not need ornament. A captive might be kept aboard for days or weeks, sleeping near cargo, guarded near the companionway, hearing the ship's structure speak in the night, the pump sucking bilge, the rudder chains knocking, the mast partners creaking under strain, the wet slap of rope against rail. Food was poor and measured. Water tasted of cask rot. Air below deck thickened with sweat, vomit, mildew, lamp smoke, and the sour breath of terrified bodies. Disease was another captor. Dysentery, fever, infection, scurvy, and infected rope burns could kill more quietly than a pistol. The pirates themselves often lived in filth, shirts blackened with tar, hands scarred from line and blade, teeth loosened by bad diet, skin salted raw by spray. Yet captivity was also administrative. Names were remembered when useful, erased when not. Some prisoners were exchanged, some were released after cargo was stripped. Some were forced to cook, mend clothing, carry water, nurse the sick, translate, or help identify valuable goods. Some women were enslaved before capture and remained trapped in systems far older and larger than piracy itself. For them, the pirate deck was not a temporary nightmare, but another marketplace of human ownership, where flags changed, but chains remained. The terrifying truth is that piracy did not exist outside empire. It fed from the same ports, wars, plantations, insurance claims, naval shortages, and colonial appetites that already made the Atlantic a machine of suffering. Pirates like to imagine themselves as men outside law, yet their ships often carried their own law written in articles of agreement. These articles could define shares of plunder, compensation for lost limbs, punishment for theft, voting rights, discipline, and the captain's authority in battle. But those documents protected the crew, not the captives. For women taken at sea, there was no equal court, no advocate, no secure witness, only the fragile hope that profit would restrain cruelty. Some pirate crews banned women from remaining aboard for long because they feared disorder, jealousy, conflict, or divided loyalties. Others ignored such rules when money, labor, or leverage demanded it. The result was not a single Hollywood pattern, but a terrifying inconsistency. One crew might release female passengers after stripping the vessel. Another might carry them to a pirate anchorage like New Providence, a remote quay, a hidden inlet, or a corrupt colonial port where officials asked few questions if silver crossed the table. Careening beaches were especially frightening places. Ships hauled onto their sides, hulls exposed, barnacles scraped away, seams repacked, fires burning under pitch pots, men drunk from captured rum, muskets stacked near palm trunks, and prisoners watched under a sun that made every plank smell of hot tar. A ship being careened looked wounded, but it was also being reborn for violence. The pirates cleaned the hull to regain speed, checked the tumble-home, repaired sprung planks, patched sails, replaced frayed standing rigging, and prepared to hunt again. For captives, every repair meant the nightmare could continue. Every hammer blow on oak, every shaving of caulking iron, every splash of pitch sealing a seam was a reminder that the ship was being strengthened while their own choices were being stripped away. The most chilling stories are not always the bloodiest. They are the ones where survival leaves almost no record. Maritime archives preserve cargo manifests, court testimony, admiralty reports, trial transcripts, ransom notes, and colonial correspondence. But the inner lives of captive women often vanish between official lines. A clerk might write "passengers taken," "women detained," "servants carried off," or "Negroes seized," reducing human terror to inventory. Behind those words were hours of waiting, bargaining, hunger, humiliation, cold rain, and the unbearable sound of decisions made by armed strangers. Some women survived by silence. Some survived by negotiating. Some survived because they had skills pirates needed: nursing, sewing, cooking, interpreting, knowledge of ports, or familiarity with trade routes. Some survived because a ransom was paid. Some survived because a pirate captain feared retaliation if he harmed a politically connected captive. Others survived only to return to societies that treated captivity itself as a stain, forcing them to carry both trauma and suspicion. In port, the same world that feared pirates could be cruel to those who escaped them. Families asked what was lost. Courts asked what could be proven. Merchants asked what cargo remained, and officials asked whether blame could be shifted. The woman herself was often secondary to property, reputation, and paperwork. That is why the phrase "captured by pirates" hides more than it reveals. It hides the stink of locked holds, the taste of brackish water, the pressure of a stranger's pistol near the ribs, the orange pulse of a slow match near a cannon vent, the fear of being sold, exchanged, abandoned, or forgotten, and the knowledge that the sea could swallow both crime and witness before sunrise. By the early 18th century, imperial navies began tightening the noose. Pirate havens were raided, governors offered pardons, warships hunted sloops through channels and shoals, and captured pirates were tried under admiralty law before crowds eager for spectacle. The same governments that once tolerated privateering now displayed hanged bodies in chains as warnings at harbor mouths. Yet justice for captives was uneven. A pirate might be executed for robbery, mutiny, or murder, while the quieter suffering of women taken aboard remained buried beneath legal language. The fate of captured women was horrifying, not because every story followed the same sensational pattern, but because every outcome depended on power they did not possess. Their lives could be priced in pounds sterling, weighed against cargo, traded for provisions, ignored by courts, or erased by shame. A pirate ship was a moving world of wood, iron, canvas, salt, lawlessness, and calculation. The keelson holding the spine together, the futtocks curving upward like ribs. The guns lashed tight against recoil. The powder kept dry in leather cartridges. The articles of agreement protecting thieves from each other, and below all of it, captives listening to the sea slap against the hull while men above decided whether they were ransom, labor, evidence, burden, or profit. That is the real terror. Not a tavern myth, not a cursed flag, not a romantic legend of freedom. The horror was the cold maritime system that allowed a woman to vanish from an ordinary voyage into a floating economy of violence, where survival depended on weather, wealth, usefulness, paperwork, and the mood of armed men standing between her and the horizon.